The morning sun stretched across the sleepy town, golden light spilling over the quiet streets, but inside the Moore household, chaos erupted. 7-year-old Lily Moore clutched her tiny backpack to her chest, tears streaking down her face, and trembled as she bolted out the front door. They beat my mama," she shouted, her voice cracking with fear. Her small legs carried her faster than she'd ever run before, propelled by sheer panic and a desperate need for help. Her destination wasn't a police station or a neighbor's house. It was the Hells Angels clubhouse at the edge of town, a place she had only seen from a distance, where black leather jackets, roaring engines, and men who seemed larger than life ruled the pavement. The thought of approaching them terrified her, but the terror of leaving her mother to suffering was far worse. Lily pounded on the massive wooden door with all her might, the sound echoing down the empty street. Inside, Rico and several other bikers were already seated at the long picnic tables, sipping coffee and discussing the day's plans. The heavy rumble of engines and the smell of gasoline mixed with the aroma of strong coffee. When the loud, insistent knocking began, Rico glanced up lazily. "Now who the hell's out there at this hour?" he muttered. Before anyone could answer, the door swung open and Lily stumbled inside, breathless, voice cracking as she repeated, "They beat my mama. Please, you have to help her." The room went completely silent. The air itself seemed to freeze. The bikers, men who had seen violence, danger, and betrayal in countless forms, were suddenly faced with a child whose fear and urgency cut sharper than any blade. Rico stood, towering over her, eyes narrowing as he instinctively sensed the gravity of the situation. "Slow down, kid. Take a breath. Tell me everything," he said, kneeling slightly to meet her gaze. Lily hiccuped through tears, words tumbling out in a rush. "It's Mr. Hargrove. He's been hurting her. I tried to stop it. He's so big, and she can't." The bikers exchanged looks, muscles tensing, leather sleeves creaking as they shifted forward. They had faced criminals before, but the raw, desperate fear of a child pleading for her mother's safety struck deeper than any threat or fight. Silence hung for a moment, then Rico's jaw tightened. "All right," he said, voice low, controlled, but carrying steel under the warmth. "You stay here, kid. We're going to handle this." Lily clutched his hand instinctively, feeling the strength radiating from him, the unspoken promise that someone was finally on her side. Outside, engines started firing up, the low growl vibrating through the earth as men quickly prepared to leave. The calm efficiency, the loyalty, and the moral clarity of the bikers created a stark contrast to the chaos and terror that Lily had just fled. In that moment, she realized that help had arrived, not in whispers, not in papers or promises, but in the living, breathing embodiment of courage and protection. The roar of motorcycles cut through the morning air as the Hells Angels lined up, ready to descend on the house where violence had stained innocence. Lily's small hands clutched the edge of the clubhouse table, heart pounding in rhythm with the engines outside. She knew, somehow, that these men, these bikers, these warriors, were different. They weren't coming for revenge. They were coming for justice. And in that moment, hope surged in her chest, fierce and unrelenting. The engines roared to life with a sound that seemed to shake the very street beneath the clubhouse. Ethan, Rico, Troy, and the rest of the Hells Angels revved in perfect unison, the vibrations running through the soles of their boots and the leather of their jackets. Lily clutched Rico's hand tightly, small fingers digging into the rough calluses, as the massive doors of the clubhouse swung open. The morning air, warm and bright, was instantly filled with the thunderous growl of chrome beasts taking to the road. "Hold on, kid," Rico shouted over the din, adjusting his helmet. "We're not going to let anyone hurt your mom. Not today." Lily nodded, tears still streaking her face but now mixed with a glimmer of hope. The convoy surged forward, engines roaring and tires screaming against the asphalt, weaving through the town streets with precision. The bikers moved like a single organism, fluid, coordinated, and purposeful. Every head turned as they passed. Everyone knew that when the Hells Angels rode, it was more than spectacle. It was power, moral force, and the promise of justice. The morning sun stretched across the sleepy town, golden light spilling over the quiet streets, but inside the Moore household, chaos erupted. 7-year-old Lily Moore clutched her tiny backpack to her chest, tears streaking down her face, and trembled as she bolted out the front door. They beat my mama," she shouted, her voice cracking with fear. Her small legs carried her faster than she'd ever run before, propelled by sheer panic and a desperate need for help. Her destination wasn't a police station or a neighbor's house. It was the Hells Angels clubhouse at the edge of town, a place she had only seen from a distance, where black leather jackets, roaring engines, and men who seemed larger than life ruled the pavement. The thought of approaching them terrified her, but the terror of leaving her mother to suffering was far worse. Lily pounded on the massive wooden door with all her might, the sound echoing down the empty street. Inside, Rico and several other bikers were already seated at the long picnic tables, sipping coffee and discussing the day's plans. The heavy rumble of engines and the smell of gasoline mixed with the aroma of strong coffee. When the loud, insistent knocking began, Rico glanced up lazily. "Now who the hell's out there at this hour?" he muttered. Before anyone could answer, the door swung open and Lily stumbled inside, breathless, voice cracking as she repeated, "They beat my mama. Please, you have to help her." The room went completely silent. The air itself seemed to freeze. The bikers, men who had seen violence, danger, and betrayal in countless forms, were suddenly faced with a child whose fear and urgency cut sharper than any blade. Rico stood, towering over her, eyes narrowing as he instinctively sensed the gravity of the situation. "Slow down, kid. Take a breath. Tell me everything," he said, kneeling slightly to meet her gaze. Lily hiccuped through tears, words tumbling out in a rush. "It's Mr. Hargrove. He's been hurting her. I tried to stop it. He's so big, and she can't." The bikers exchanged looks, muscles tensing, leather sleeves creaking as they shifted forward. They had faced criminals before, but the raw, desperate fear of a child pleading for her mother's safety struck deeper than any threat or fight. Silence hung for a moment, then Rico's jaw tightened. "All right," he said, voice low, controlled, but carrying steel under the warmth. "You stay here, kid. We're going to handle this." Lily clutched his hand instinctively, feeling the strength radiating from him, the unspoken promise that someone was finally on her side. Outside, engines started firing up, the low growl vibrating through the earth as men quickly prepared to leave. The calm efficiency, the loyalty, and the moral clarity of the bikers created a stark contrast to the chaos and terror that Lily had just fled. In that moment, she realized that help had arrived, not in whispers, not in papers or promises, but in the living, breathing embodiment of courage and protection. The roar of motorcycles cut through the morning air as the Hells Angels lined up, ready to descend on the house where violence had stained innocence. Lily's small hands clutched the edge of the clubhouse table, heart pounding in rhythm with the engines outside. She knew, somehow, that these men, these bikers, these warriors, were different. They weren't coming for revenge. They were coming for justice. And in that moment, hope surged in her chest, fierce and unrelenting. The engines roared to life with a sound that seemed to shake the very street beneath the clubhouse. Ethan, Rico, Troy, and the rest of the Hells Angels revved in perfect unison, the vibrations running through the soles of their boots and the leather of their jackets. Lily clutched Rico's hand tightly, small fingers digging into the rough calluses, as the massive doors of the clubhouse swung open. The morning air, warm and bright, was instantly filled with the thunderous growl of chrome beasts taking to the road. "Hold on, kid," Rico shouted over the din, adjusting his helmet. "We're not going to let anyone hurt your mom. Not today." Lily nodded, tears still streaking her face but now mixed with a glimmer of hope. The convoy surged forward, engines roaring and tires screaming against the asphalt, weaving through the town streets with precision. The bikers moved like a single organism, fluid, coordinated, and purposeful. Every head turned as they passed. Everyone knew that when the Hells Angels rode, it was more than spectacle. It was power, moral force, and the promise of justice. Rico led the group, scanning the road ahead, while Troy fell in beside Lily, keeping an eye on her. "You're going to be all right," Troy said, voice steady, though he had seen enough horror in his years to understand that words were often the only comfort a child could cling to. Lily nodded silently, gripping the sides of Troy's seat, her small frame trembling, not from fear, but from the adrenaline and the intensity of what was about to happen. Minutes stretched like hours as they approached the Moore home. The bikers slowed just enough to assess the situation from the street. Through the front window, they could see Mr. Hargrove moving violently, a shadow of aggression in the sunlight. Rico's jaw tightened, his leather gloves clenching the handlebars. "Everyone stay sharp. No unnecessary risk to the kid. We do this clean, quick, and controlled," he commanded. The Hells Angels descended upon the house like a storm. Troy and a few others reached the back door while Rico and the larger bikers approached the front. The sight of dozens of men, engines idling in a calculated line of intimidation, caused Mr. Hargrove to freeze mid-motion. He had expected resistance from the mother or a neighbor at most, but a battalion of leather-clad, Harley-riding giants? He wasn't prepared for this. Fear finally took over his bravado. Inside, Lily watched from Rico's protective side as her mother, bruised and trembling, peeked through the door. Her eyes widened at the sight, the bikers forming a barrier of strength, unyielding and calm. Rico moved forward, voice firm but controlled. "Step aside. You've hurt someone you shouldn't have. It ends now." The air was thick with tension. Even the neighbors, drawn out by the rumble of motorcycles, stopped and stared. But Rico's calm authority, combined with the sheer presence of dozens of bikers, left no room for argument. Mr. Hargrove attempted to lunge, but a subtle hand signal from Rico sent Troy and two others to intercept him before he could reach anyone. Within moments, he was restrained, unable to move, staring in disbelief at the sheer force of unity and moral authority confronting him. Lily's mother, shaken but safe, ran forward and hugged her daughter tightly. The sight of her child unharmed and the men who had protected them left her speechless, tears of relief streaming down her face. Rico turned to Lily, kneeling to her level. "See, kid? Courage isn't just standing up. Sometimes it's trusting the right people to help you. You called us, and we came. That's how we protect the innocent." Lily's voice trembled, a mixture of awe and gratitude. "You really helped us." Rico's expression softened. "We don't just ride for ourselves. We ride for those who need protection. Today, your mama needed help. And that's what family does." The bikers stood tall around the house, a silent wall of protection. Engines idled as neighbors watched in awe, realizing that justice had arrived, not with threats or vengeance, but with disciplined courage, loyalty, and moral strength. Lily held her mother's hand tightly, a newfound sense of safety warming her chest. She understood, even at 7 years old, that the bikers weren't just men with leather and engines. They were guardians, champions of the vulnerable, and a living testament to courage and integrity in action. The sun had climbed higher by the time the bikers eased their Harleys into the street, engines now a low hum, the intensity of the morning's rescue lingering in the warm air. Lily clutched her mother's hand tightly as they stepped out of the house, still trembling from the ordeal but feeling a safety they hadn't known in weeks. Her mother, Amelia, whose face bore the marks of fear and bruises from the previous day, sank onto the porch steps, burying her face in her hands, the weight of relief and exhaustion washing over her. Rico and the others approached slowly, giving space while keeping an imposing presence. Their leather jackets gleamed under the sun, their chrome bikes reflecting light like armor forged for protection rather than aggression. Rico began, voice calm yet commanding, "You're safe now. That man won't be hurting you again. We've made sure of it." Amelia lifted her head, eyes wide, trying to process the fact that dozens of Hell's Angels had arrived at her doorstep, not to intimidate, but to protect her family. Her voice trembled. I don't know how to thank you." Rico shook his head. "No thanks needed. Just know that bravery comes in many forms. Calling for help, trusting the right people, that's courage too." Lily looked up at Rico, her small frame leaning against his leg. Will you always protect us?" she asked, eyes wide with a mixture of hope and awe. Rico knelt down, meeting her gaze with steady eyes. Kid, that's what family does. Protection isn't just about muscles or threats, it's about loyalty, moral strength, and knowing when to step up. Today, you showed courage by asking for help. And we'll always be there for you and your mom, as long as we're around. Lily's tiny face broke into a relieved smile, the fear that had gripped her now replaced with a sense of security and belonging she had never known. The bikers began to disperse slowly, some checking their motorcycles, others offering practical advice on safety and reporting Hargrove's actions to the authorities. Amelia watched in disbelief as these men, who many in the town feared or judged harshly, treated her family with the utmost respect and care. They weren't there to punish, they were there to uphold justice, to act as guardians of the innocent. The difference between fear and trust had never been clearer to her. Troy lingered behind, crouching next to Lily. "Hey, you were really brave today," he said softly. "Not everyone would have done what you did. You saw something wrong, and you asked for help. That's courage, kid. And it made a real difference." Lily's small hands gripped his, her voice soft but resolute. "I want to be brave like you, like all of you." Troy smiled, ruffling her hair. "You already are. Courage isn't about size, it's about heart, and you've got more heart than most grown-ups I know." By mid-afternoon, Amelia had begun tending to her wounds with the help of a neighbor, and Lily sat on the porch steps, still clutching her backpack but now calmer, watching the bikers ride off down the street in formation. Each engine's rumble seemed to echo the message that had been imprinted in her mind. Strength is nothing without moral guidance, and loyalty and courage are what truly define a family. Lily realized that even small actions, asking for help, trusting others, standing up to fear, could ripple outward into something far greater. As the last Harley disappeared around the corner, Amelia pulled Lily close, her voice trembling yet firm. "Your bravery brought help, Lily. Never forget that courage can come from anyone, no matter how small." Lily rested her head on her mother's shoulder, the warmth and safety of that moment sinking deep into her chest. She understood, in a way only a child could, that justice sometimes came in unexpected forms, and that the world could hold both terrifying darkness and fierce protection. The streets of the town had returned to their usual rhythm, but the tension in the Moore household lingered like a shadow. Amelia's body ached, bruises painting her skin in dark purples and blues, but the emotional toll of the previous day weighed even heavier. She sat at the kitchen table, hands trembling slightly as she sipped lukewarm coffee, replaying the terror she'd felt. The thought of Hargrove, his anger, his violence, made her stomach twist with unease. Yet, despite the fear, she knew that the Hells Angels had changed the equation, restoring a sense of safety she hadn't felt in months. Lily, however, was already chattering nervously about what had happened at the clubhouse, her small hands gesturing wildly. "Mom, they weren't scary at all. They were, like superheroes. And Rico said they'd always protect us." Amelia smiled weakly, heart swelling with gratitude, but guilt gnawed at her. "Sweetheart, we can't rely on bikers forever. We have to be careful, and make sure we handle this properly." Lily tilted her head, her big eyes wide with curiosity and conviction. "But Mom, they're strong and brave. They helped us. Maybe we can tell them if he tries anything again." Amelia sighed, recognizing the truth in her daughter's words. The bikers weren't just allies, they were a shield, and sometimes strength alone could prevent future danger. The next afternoon, Amelia had to confront the past head-on. Hargrove had returned to the house, attempting to intimidate and manipulate, thinking his presence would go unnoticed. But the moment he stepped onto the property, the rumble of engines echoed through the neighborhood, startling him. From around the corner, a line of black leather jackets, chrome gleaming in the sunlight, appeared like a wall of living authority. Rico, Troy, and several others dismounted and positioned themselves strategically, forming an unspoken but unmistakable barrier between him and the Moore family. "Stay back," Rico said, voice low and deliberate, each word measured. Hargrove froze mid-step, his confidence dissolving in the presence of the bikers. You can't," he began, stammering, his bravado crumbling. The bikers didn't need to threaten, they didn't need to raise their fists. The sheer force of unity, discipline, and moral strength radiated outward, making it clear that anyone who crossed the line would face overwhelming consequence. Amelia stepped forward cautiously, standing beside Lily. "You're not welcome here," she said, voice stronger than she felt. "Leave now, or you'll answer to the people who protect us." The irony of being shielded by men who society often feared was not lost on her, but the relief of having protection was palpable. Hargrove's eyes darted from Amelia to Lily, then finally to the bikers. Realization dawned on his face. The game had changed. There was no fear, no panic, and no weakness to exploit. Rico approached Hargrove, calm but unmistakably authoritative. "You hurt someone who didn't deserve it. That ends today. The law will handle your next steps, but we're making sure you don't get a chance to hurt anyone else. Understand?" Hargrove swallowed hard, nodding mutely, realizing that the Hells Angels' presence had elevated justice to an immediate, unmissable certainty. Amelia exhaled, the weight of months of fear lifting slightly as she watched the man finally retreat, defeated not by violence, but by the moral force standing between him and her family. After he left, Lily ran into Rico's arms, hugging him tightly. "Thank you. Thank you for coming back and scaring him." Rico chuckled softly, ruffling her hair. "Kid, that's what we do. We protect. Loyalty and courage mean showing up, not just for yourself, but for those who can't protect themselves. You and your mom showed courage too. Asking for help was brave." Amelia smiled, watching her daughter beam with relief and pride. The Morse was safe, at least for now, and the bikers had reinforced that safety with unwavering moral authority, turning fear into protection, and chaos into order. The afternoon sun cast long, warm shadows across the Moore property, but the events of the morning had created a new kind of light, a quiet, steady glow of security and trust. Lily sat on the porch swing, swinging her legs back and forth, while Amelia leaned against the railing, taking in the serenity for the first time in weeks. Yet, the presence of the Hells Angels lingered, an invisible reassurance that protection and justice weren't just words. They were living, breathing forces, embodied in leather jackets and chrome Harleys. Rico and Troy lingered nearby, leaning against their bikes, speaking quietly about logistics and the town's upcoming charity ride, but keeping a watchful eye on the Moore family. Lily approached them cautiously, her small fingers tracing the edge of Troy's jacket. Can I come ride with you someday?" she asked timidly, eyes shining with hope. Troy smiled, crouching down to her level. "Someday, kid, yes. Riding isn't just about speed or fun, it's about learning courage, loyalty, and knowing who's worth trusting. You've already shown you have all of that." Lily's eyes widened, a mix of pride and disbelief sparkling in her gaze. Amelia watched silently, her heart swelling with gratitude. These bikers, who many people feared or misunderstood, had not only defended her family but had taught Lily and her the importance of courage, community, and moral integrity. "You all really are different," Amelia said softly, voice tinged with emotion. "You don't just ride for yourselves. You help people who can't help themselves." Rico nodded, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "That's what family does. Strength isn't about intimidation. It's about protection, loyalty, and showing up when it counts." The rest of the bikers began assembling in the driveway, chatting, laughing, and sharing stories that balanced toughness with humanity. For Lily and Amelia, the sight was mesmerizing. Men who were often judged as fearsome were now heroes, protectors, mentors, and teachers. The bikers' unity and moral clarity impressed upon the Morse a lesson far more valuable than any ride could offer. Courage and loyalty could be embodied in action, not just words, and the strongest bonds were forged through honor, trust, and selfless action. Rico signaled for a small convoy demonstration. "Kid," he said, "come watch. Pay attention. This is how we protect each other, and sometimes, that's how we protect people like you and your mom." Lily clambered up beside him on the motorcycle seat, gripping his jacket tightly. Engines roared to life again, echoing in perfect harmony, a living testament to power harnessed with responsibility. The bikers rode in formation around the property, showing coordination, awareness, and the silent code that governed their brotherhood. Lily's eyes were wide, taking in the lessons of loyalty, vigilance, and courage with every turn and synchronized movement. After the demonstration, Rico crouched next to Lily, brushing her hair back gently. "You see, kid, it's not the leather or the bikes that make us strong. It's the trust we have in each other, the courage to stand up for what's right, and the choice to protect those who can't protect themselves. That's what family is, bonds forged in steel, heart, and honor." Lily's small hands clasped his, voice steady now despite the intensity of the day. "I want to be brave like you someday," she said. Rico smiled warmly, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You already are. Never forget that courage isn't about size. It's about heart." As the bikers prepared to leave, Amelia hugged Rico tightly. "Thank you. You've given us more than protection, you've given us hope." Rico nodded, placing a reassuring hand on her back. "Hope is earned through action. Today, you and Lily reminded us why we do what we do. Remember, courage and loyalty aren't just for bikers, they're for anyone willing to stand up for what's right." The engines roared once again as the Hells Angels departed, leaving behind a profound sense of safety, strength, and moral clarity. Lily watched them disappear around the corner, feeling braver and more protected than she ever had. Amelia held her daughter close, realizing that the day had transformed their lives, not through wealth, influence, or violence, but through unwavering courage, loyalty, and the selfless protection of those who embodied moral strength in action. The evening sun stretched long shadows across the moor yard, painting everything in warm amber tones. Amelia sat on the porch steps, still sore from the ordeal, while Lily played quietly at her feet, occasionally glancing toward the road, hoping to see the bikers again. The adrenaline of the morning had faded, replaced by a lingering hum of tension and relief. It was quiet, but the lesson of the day had already begun to take root in both mother and daughter. Courage, they realized, wasn't about fighting or speed, it was about doing the right thing, even when it scared you. Rico and Troy returned briefly that evening, unannounced but welcome, checking in to ensure that everything was safe. Their presence carried a gravity that reminded Amelia of just how serious the morning had been, but also of the unwavering protection the bikers offered. "You did the right thing today," Rico said, crouching down beside Lily. "You asked for help. That takes courage, kid. A lot of grown-ups wouldn't have done what you did." Lily's eyes shone with pride, and she repeated the words she had heard all day. I was brave." Rico nodded firmly. "More than brave. You acted with heart. You protected your mom just by standing up and calling us. That's courage that matters." Amelia listened quietly, absorbing the gravity of Rico's words. She realized that courage wasn't measured in fists or engines, it was measured in action, in moral clarity, and in willingness to stand against fear for the sake of someone else. The little girl who had run down the street, panicked and terrified, had taught everyone a lesson in bravery that no leather jacket or roaring engine could match. Amelia felt her own heart swell with pride, realizing that courage was contagious. Troy knelt beside Amelia, his voice calm but carrying weight. "Seeing her today, it reminded us why we ride, why we protect. It's not about toughness or intimidation. It's about making a difference where it counts. You and Lily reminded us that true strength is in heart, not just in muscle or firepower." Amelia's eyes glistened, understanding the dual lesson, that bravery exists in everyone, and that moral strength sometimes requires asking for help and trusting those who embody it. They stayed a while longer, talking about safety, loyalty, and the unspoken codes the bikers lived by. Lily listened intently, hanging on every word, learning that courage was as much about knowing when to step back and rely on trusted allies as it was about stepping forward to confront danger. Rico emphasized the importance of moral integrity, teaching that the strongest people are those who act ethically and bravely, even when it's inconvenient or frightening. As they finally departed, the evening air filled with the fading echo of engines, Amelia hugged Lily tightly. "You were so brave today," she whispered. Lily hugged back fiercely, her small frame trembling, but her voice steady. "We had help, Mom. And we were brave together." Amelia smiled, understanding that the day had given them more than protection. It had given them lessons in courage, trust, and moral clarity that would last a lifetime. That night, as the Morse finally settled into a quiet home, the echo of motorcycles and the feeling of unwavering protection lingered. They understood, in a way only those who have faced fear can, that courage isn't about never feeling afraid. It's about acting when fear threatens to paralyze you. Loyalty and moral strength, embodied by the Hell's Angels, had turned terror into safety, despair into hope, and fear into lasting lessons in bravery. The following morning, the Moore household felt different. The sun streamed through the curtains, casting a warm glow on the living room, but it wasn't the sunlight that made the room feel safe. It was the quiet, unwavering assurance that the Hell's Angels had left behind. Amelia stood in the kitchen, sipping her coffee, feeling the bruises on her arms fade in significance compared to the relief that coursed through her veins. She looked over at Lily, who was playing with a small doll on the rug, a faint smile on her face, no longer burdened by fear. Rico and Troy returned for a brief visit, this time without the entourage of roaring engines, to ensure that the Morse had truly regained their peace. "You two handled yesterday better than most adults could," Rico said, leaning casually against the doorframe. "Asking for help, trusting the right people, and standing strong, that's courage. You've earned your safety and your place in the story of people who look out for each other." Amelia nodded, tears pricking at her eyes, overwhelmed by gratitude. We didn't know who to call. We didn't know anyone would care this much," she whispered. Lily looked up at Troy with wide, innocent eyes. "Can we always be safe now?" she asked softly. Troy crouched beside her, brushing her hair back gently. "Yes, kid. Safety isn't just about walls or locks, it's about courage, knowing when to ask for help, and trusting the people who care. Today, you showed all of that. You'll carry it with you forever." Lily smiled shyly, her small heart swelling with pride. She had learned that bravery wasn't about fighting with fists, but about standing firm in the face of fear, seeking help, and believing in the goodness of those willing to protect you. Amelia pulled Lily into her arms. "The bikers, they weren't scary at all. They were heroes," she said softly. Lily nodded, hugging her mother tightly. "They were our family today," she whispered. It struck Amelia that family wasn't always defined by blood. It could be formed through loyalty, protection, and moral courage. The Hell's Angels had shown them a new kind of strength, the quiet, steady power of people who stand up for what is right, without asking for anything in return. Rico and Troy prepared to leave, helmets in hand, glancing back one last time. "Remember," Rico said, voice firm but kind, "courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. Loyalty is proving yourself through deeds, and strength is using power to protect, not to intimidate. You've learned that in one day, and it will stay with you forever." Lily waved, smiling widely, while Amelia stood strong, a newfound sense of empowerment settling in her chest. As the bikers rode off down the street, the sound of engines fading into the distance, Amelia and Lily stood together on the porch, feeling a profound change. They had faced fear, witnessed courage in action, and learned that moral strength and loyalty could transform the world around them. Safety, hope, and courage had become tangible, living lessons, embodied in those who chose to act when it mattered most. Courage isn't measured by size or strength, it's shown in action, even when fear is overwhelming. True loyalty is proven by protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Moral strength means standing up for what is right, regardless of the risks. Acts of bravery, no matter how small, can ripple outward, creating hope and lasting change. And sometimes, the greatest protection and lessons in life come from those who show up when we need it most.